Hi, how often do we get to see Star Trek and Star Wars games in a single video? And both of them pretty good, no less. Not often, that's how. So let's check them out and another 8 games from 1999 together. The Sacred Amulet, also known as Aztec, the curse in the heart of the City of Gold, is a first-person perspective point-and-click adventure with numerous but quite brilliantly implemented educational elements. You play as Little Serpent, a young and courageous Aztec hunter, and on one of those routine hunts you accidentally bear witness to a murder, or well, a fatal blow really, when a nondescript nobleman is mortally wounded by the Otomi warrior Mountainhead. Mountainhead, which is a name that can have so many meanings, I just can't begin describing them all here, especially that some may not be YouTube friendly. As you rush to the wounded to save him, as any good Aztec would, he gives you his ornate necklace and the name Tlatli, and then promptly dies. Like exactly how he would in a budget movie. Terrible for his family, but something we needed for the game to get going. The murderer, as it turns out, uses this opportunity to shift blame on you and kidnaps your parents. What's worse, it seems that suspiciously, along with the death of the nobleman, your village folks seem to be affected by a strange and unknown disease that's rather deadly. So now, falsely accused of murder, with people around you dying like flies in a fly trap, you must not only clear your name and find the culprit, but also rescue your parents, find the reason behind the disease, if it had anything to do with the death of the nobleman, and figure out where in all of that the mysterious titular Sacred Amulet fits. There is no reason to dance around the subject like a ballerina with a broken ankle, so gracelessly and in pain, the Sacred Amulet is an edutainment type of an adventure. And I know that most of us hate those with a passion of a store clerk refusing to sell cigarettes to a minor, but hear me out. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's plenty adventures and mysteries to be solved in this one, but it's all also very thoroughly researched and chock full of historical data and facts. But unlike most other games in the subgenre, it doesn't try to push all of that in your face, teaching you what you don't care about, or having you read through an encyclopedia worth of data just to be able to progress and have fun. None of that in fact. There's tons upon tons of interesting and important background and historical info in the game, but it's all optional. You can dig in whenever you want to follow up on a particular plot points that interest you, to understand better what and how is happening, but you don't have to. You can be your own doctor, dosing yourself with the historical medicine as much or as little as you feel like it, which I feel is the best recipe for a game in this particular category. So, the Sacred Amulet is a title that's as good when played for fun only as it is when used as an educational tool. All that said, the puzzles are pretty easy, so while most gamers would find a way to enjoy it, hardcore adventuring fans may consider the challenge lacking and henceforth gameplay subpar. So, while being pretty good even if a bit easy, the Sacred Amulet never gained the following it should have, and despite being appreciated by most who played it, it remained largely unknown and/or ignored by gamers of yore. Could Corsairs' Conquest at the Sea title be a coincidence, especially that in many markets it was known as Corsairs only, or is it a homage to Sid Meier's Pirates? With no exclamation mark, but one nonetheless. Well, I feel that the answer is somewhere in between. It's a real-time strategy action-adventure mixture set in 17th century in which you play as a privateer employed by either England, Spain, France or the Netherlands. Well, to be quite honest here, Spain and Netherlands are only available in the gold version of the game, but it released in the same year, so treat this overview here as one covering both at the same time. Playing as privateer, you're theoretically an arm, nay a fist of the king of the country you align to, and will fulfill his orders and requests in exchange to be allowed to assert the right of your nation throughout the world, and earn huge fortune as you do just that. And if you wondered about it, then yes, in layman's terms, a privateer is just a glorified pirate that works for the king. So very little laws apply to you and you have a free hand to do a lot, all the while staying loyal to your ruler. Well, at least on the surface, cause a real buccaneer answers to no one but the Lady Sea. And as a pirate, privateer life simulations go, this one's a gem. Hidden one perhaps, but a gem nonetheless. You start in a small ship, but soon enough you'll be able to change it, and the options here are rather vast and, dare I say it, historically correct. So even giants like a galleon holding 600 men is an option. Well, it may not be the fastest or most agile ship out there, but it's a force to be recognized for sure. And since we're on the subject of forces big or small, there's naturally gonna be a lot of combat you'll partake in. And for using that, be it when fighting against other ships or ports, there's a slew of cannonballs to pick between. From normal through explosive that are naturally great at destroying buildings and sinking ships to fragmentation ones used in decimating the opposing crews and chain cannonballs used to destroy sails and slow down enemies. Not all encounters are ranged only, there's also boarding too, which is something you'll have to do a lot of, and it's easily a more strategic side of combat and plays out in RTS format. What's best about it though is that it's not all numbers and sizes, and if you learn how to play Corsairs and practice a lot, yes, I said a lot, then defeating a bigger and stronger opponent is possible even with small number of units if you can out-strategize the CPU, that is. Boarding can only end in either your opponents surrender, unless they're pirates, cause they never do, or you massacring all of them with cold blood. Despite the game's title, it's not all about cannonballs, sword fights and drunk parrots mumbling about crackers and barrels of grog. Nope, there's more to Corsairs, a lot more in fact. So you can and will have to trade, you can capture outposts, build fortresses and mend them for protection, and as you play, your relations with all the nations will change fluidly, always serving fresh and unexpected adventures all the way through. Even more so, as you'll be given many different missions by the governors of different outposts, taking you to the far ends of Corsairs' rather vast and varied maps. The game can be played in campaign composed out of series of several scenarios, each with a very specific goal to achieve, or so-called adventure mode, which for all intents and purposes is just a sandbox, in which the only possible quote-unquote victory condition is to capture all of the ports on the map. I know I've been praising Corsairs for a while now, and I have my reasons. One of them being that while not as straightforward to get into as Pirates was, it still is a very fun and enjoyable swashbuckler-themed adventure. But Corsairs has its own issues too. The interface is not great, the presentation is definitely not 1999 worthy, and while it's not difficult per se, it takes a minute to get into. So, the question that comes to mind now is pretty simple. Is it better than Sid Meier's Pirates? It's not, but it's also very different, so it's not a fair comparison and one that should not be made. Both of these have their strong and weak points, and both are worth experiencing. While first Rainbow Six was a groundbreaking title and one that moved the world with its accuracy of counter-terrorism operative simulation, the second, so our today's pick, Rogue Spear, was much better game. It was in fact what the first game should have been, as it improved on the formula so considerably that I believe that there was no one who'd pick the first one over this one. And sure, yeah, feel free to prove me wrong in the comments, I'm open to hear your take on it. This time, the group that you're working on dismantling is called Rogue Spear, an apt name for an orc of bodies I must add, and they're threatening the world's stability, taking hostages in various strategic locations. The gameplay mechanics stayed more or less the same and faithful to the original, so you always begin with a mission briefing, highlighting the on-site conditions and intel that you have, and your objectives, be it removal of all hostiles, hostage rescue, or whatever else that the game throws at you. Then choose your squad out of numerous international operatives and equip them for the challenges ahead. After that, it's planning, using detailed maps of the location. Naturally, you can go as anal in this bit as you like, or take it slower and just lay a general plan without getting into too much detail. It's your call. When that's done, you finally take direct control of one of the teams assigned to the mission while controlling the others by issuing orders remotely. Now, the changes I initially mentioned, those that made it a better game, may not seem like a lot to a Sunday special agent, but all FPS pros will definitely appreciate them. So, first of all, the AI is not as thick as the cheap toilet paper you can get on a discount in a supermarket, standing there and taking grenades head-on as if they were nothing, or completely ignoring their allies falling down around them when sniped from afar. I mean, it didn't happen all the time in the original, but when it did, it was actually really taking you out of experience. Your teammates don't block your passage in the doorways anymore either, but move out of your way as you're going, like the good electronic sheep that they are. Secondly, there are new weapons. And the chief among them is a real-life sniper rifle, which now can be used by the rifleman, strategically placed around the mission area, far from a direct action, from where he can take down the enemies one by one as you tell him to. He's not only extremely effective, but also real fun to use when positioned properly. And last but definitely not least, maps. And they're really good. Probably some of the best in the genre to date. Sure, they may lack many interactive objects many modern games seem to have all over now, but they're smartly thought out and a pleasure to play on. So, was a year enough to make Rogue Spear a true Rainbow Six 2.0? No, but it was damn close. I'd say it's more like 1.8.9, maybe 1.90. There are some things that could still be better though. Presentation, for instance, and while the sounds of all weapons are realistic and true to what the particular guns are, the graphics could use a little facelift. Same goes for the engine imperfections. So for instance, you very often get to see the enemy approaching the door from behind it because the barrel of his gun will clip through it. It's not really game-breaking, but it destroys the suspense of disbelief completely, reminding you that you're playing game only and that it's run on a series of complicated but faulty rules. Rogue Spear is a great game, no doubt about that. but it could be much better with another 6 to 12 months added to its development. Star Wars X-Wing Alliance is a sequel to TIE Fighter and X-Wing vs TIE Fighter, and a fantastic sci-fi spaceship-based first-person shooter whether you're a fan of the movies or not. In X-Wing Alliance, you do not start on any of the sides of the galactic conflict. In fact, you're Ace Azamin, the youngest of Azamin's space trading family children, flying transports and protecting them from pirates. Family background that you learn playing and in-mail that you get portrays the family to be rather sympathetic to the Rebel Alliance, and even having your father smuggle Bacta in secrecy for the Alliance in the aftermath of the Battle of Hoth. Since nothing escapes the dry raising that the Emperor is, however, and his watchdog Dark Barker either, that choice of action ultimately brought doom onto your entire family, as the Galactic Empire raided your home station, killing your father and your older brothers. These events led to the remnants of the Azamin clan seeking asylum within the Alliance and you joining the rebel forces. Story aside, X-Wing Alliance is the same old fun gameplay-wise title that the previous two were, only lifted in the terms of presentation using more complex 3D models, high-resolution textures, smoother gameplay and wider variety in ships and combat scenarios. What's more, you can finally fly bigger, multi-crew ships too, like the famous Millennium Falcon, and pick whether you want to pilot it or sit in one of the turret stations, with CPU taking control of the other location. It also features multi-part missions and, first time in the series, a very robust and easy-to-use mission builder that allows for creation of numerous different battle scenarios, using nearly all of the vehicles included in the game as both enemies or crafts that you could pilot. Even up to a whopping 96 of these ships can be present in each encounter at once, which today may not be a lot, but back then was huge. Single-player mode is composed out of over 50 unique missions and culminates with very iconic battle against a gigantic and deadly craft known from the movies, that shall remain nameless here. I'd say for the spoiler reasons, but since there's only 2, maybe 3 different giants I could have in mind here, it's hardly a difficult guess. While I'm not a huge fan of Star Wars movies, thinking that they're a little overhyped for what they are, I do enjoy most Star Wars games, as they're usually really good, and this one's no different. If you enjoy George Lucas's universe or space combat simulations, either way, you'll have a lot of fun with this one. The best commendation I can give to Superbike World Championship is that it was made by Milestone, a phenomenal developer responsible for earlier classics Screamer and Screamer 2, that second being my all-time favorite DOS arcade racer. Other than that, a notable thing about it is that unlike most of its competitors, EA, a publisher of Superbike, managed to secure a full Superbike World Championship license, which means that all the bikers, tracks, teams and motorcycles from the 1998 season were included. And while for people like myself who care very little about the simulation aspect of it, it's of close to no importance, the real racing fanatics will no doubt appreciate the attention to detail and the game being as close to real life as it was possible in 1999. Especially that the bike dynamics and physics engine were made in cooperation with Carl Fogarty, a 1998 world champion. Well, the dynamics more than the engine, but they had to be incorporated in it to work as expected, so while it's a bit of a stretch, I'm standing by it. Superbike World Championship comes with 12 real-life tracks located in Australia, San Marino, England, Germany, Italy, Austria, Holland, Spain, Japan, Indonesia and United States. And there are 5 bikes to choose from: Ducati 916, Honda RD45, Kawasaki ZX-7R, Yamaha YZF and Suzuki GSX-R, and both look incredible for 1999. You can naturally tune your bike to your heart's content, adjusting gears, suspension and tires among others, and these changes can make or break your game, as they can be felt when racing and really improve or worsen your performance. While the game is aimed at the simulation fanatics, it comes with an action mode too. It's basically arcade racing, but on a more difficult side as compared to what you'd find in other similar games. It's still a nice addition though, as it means that gamers like myself could enjoy Superbike World Championship too. You're naturally abandoning many of the customizations by picking this mode, but the skill level required to control the bike and take all the sharp turns is considerably lower too. All in all, as a simulation, it's probably the best game in the genre at the time it came out in. But as an arcade racer, it's decent at best. The mode, while nice to have, is clearly just an addition and an afterthought, but as the stupid ass saying goes, if you don't have what you like what you have, applies here near perfectly. So yeah, if you're a fan of motorbike racing simulations, here's one not to skip. Bugs Bunny Lost in Time is a 3D action platformer starring, well, Warner Brothers' most famous mascot and a whole slew of other famous Looney Tunes characters. On his way to the beach to enjoy some of that summer heat and fresh ocean breeze, Bugs Bunny gets thirsty and decides to stop for a carrot juice. You know, how one does. If I was to count how many times I've stopped for a carrot juice on my way somewhere, we'd be stuck here all day. Well, menu talking waits never happened before, but we would anyway. So yeah, he wants some of that sweet orange ecstasy, and luckily he does come across a vending machine selling it. Or so he thought. Cause mistakes and accidents happen. And this was a situation when both did. First, he mistaken the machine found to be one selling said juice, and second, he accidentally turned it on, and it happened to be a rogue time machine that near instantly propelled him through time and left him stranded God knows where. I mean, God knows when. Actually, I take it all back. He lands somewhere and it's nowhere. I mean, not nowhere as in a place that does not exist, but place quite literally called nowhere. Cause you know, video game / cartoons logic. Fortunately, Merlin happens to live in nowhere, well, Merlin Monroe to be precise, but Monroe or not, it's still a sorcerer. And Bugs is informed that to return home, he must travel through 5 different areas of time, collecting clocks and golden carrots, which will somehow allow him to return to his time. The 5 time periods are Stone Age, the Medieval Time, Pirate Years, the 1930s and Dimension X, which sounds like a stellar name for a strip club, and they are split into 21 individual stages. Bugs can run, jump, pick up objects, kick, roll, use rabbit holes to move underground, tiptoe to avoid being spotted by the enemies, climb ropes and use his ears as propellers to slowly descend when falling from great heights. Most enemies can be defeated by jumping on them or a kick, but some may require tiring first so that they would be out of breath, just the way I am now. As the game progresses, Bugs will also learn some new special abilities and face bosses in the form of his cartoon arch-villains of Elmer Fudd, Witch Haxel, Yosemite Sam, Rocky and Marvin. Given the source material that Lost in Time is based on, the graphics are quite nice as they translate to 3D with ease, and graphics along with stellar sound design both form a very satisfying presentation that is as good today as it ever was. While some may relegate Bugs Bunny games to kindertainment, yup, I coined it, make sure to use it at least once per month so it's legitimized and we can be the ones to create a new world together, I feel that Lost in Time is a title that gamers of all ages can appreciate and have fun with. Sure, it may be more immediately attractive to a younger gamer, but if you give it a minute, I'm sure you'll love it too. MIG Alley is a flight combat simulation that focuses on early jet fighter combat and is set during the Korean War, specifically in the so-called MIG Alley in northwestern North Korea. As many of you know, I am not an avid flight combat simulations player as I tend to suck at those, so most I will tell you about here is what I found about MIG Alley online. Sorry for that, but it is what it is. There are 5 different crafts available in the game: F-51 Mustang, F-80 Shooting Star, F-84 Thunderjet, F-86 Sabre and MiG-15, with the last 2 having more than one variant available and being the only full-fledged final jet engine craft, with F-80 and F-84 serving as stepping stone between these modern jets and a classical piston engine design found in F-51 Mustang. All that said, each of the crafts feels completely different to one another, and those versed in the genre and familiar with the machines that they saw in other games on real life even will definitely appreciate the subtleties. There are a few game modes in MIG Alley, Hotshot which drops you in the middle of the action, and it is quite literally a middle, filled with numerous craft on both sides of the conflict and as action-packed as some of those best movies are. Then there are single quick missions, which there is 16 of, and each of them is different and offers unique to its combat scenario, so anything from dogfights to organized bombing raids. Fun stuff apparently. And finally, there are 5 campaigns too, set in different periods of war and each focusing on a particular craft and its use case scenarios. Well, each apart from Spring Offensive of 1951, which is basically a full-on dynamic campaign taking place in the entire Korean peninsula. Each mission here, be it successful or failure, influences the situation on the front and how the next one will look like. The objective of this campaign is to reduce the opposing forces' ability to resupply their front lines. So focusing on strategic locations like bridges and transport choke points is a priority. Well, other than staying alive, which means constantly fighting off enemy planes too. What's best about it is that when you plan your offensive here, you can actually take control of any plane taking part in it. Be it in the front of offensive, in the back defending your bombers, or just play as support. All of these are available and make the game more fun than it had any right to be. So, if you're someone who's into the genre and especially historical scenarios, this one's one of the best from 1990s. Star Trek: The Birth of the Federation is a 4x turn-based strategy similar to Master of Orion 2. And if you're one of the 3 people left in the world not knowing what 4x stands for, let me explain. It's extremely exciting and exalting experience, so a game that's fun, immersive and better than most others. Or, I lied, and it may stand for Explore, Expand, Exploit and Exterminate. You choose which sounds better. I know I have my pick. Anyway, the game is naturally set in the fictional future Star Wars universe, specifically in the time period of the Next Generation TV series, and allows you to pick one of the 5 sites to control. United Federation of Planets, which is the only one I play as in Star Trek games that allow for picking it, cause you know, Federation's ideals of exploration, acceptance and understanding, their scientific focus, and how humanity progressed within it is something really close to my heart. Especially that I love the idea of all of us just being humans/earthlings and not American, English, Chinese, German, French, Japanese or whatever. In Star Trek's world, we come from Earth, as the politics move from the microplanetary scale into macro-universal one. Wow, I just kept going about the Federation and there's still 4 more to pick between. So there's the trait and so-called rules of acquisition-focused Ferengi, honorable but easy to offend and first to start a conflict, be it in a bar or between entire space regions, Klingons, highly paranoid and overfilled with emotion as opposed to their logical Vulcan counterparts Romulans, and finally, last but definitely not least, treacherous and espionage-focused race of Cardassians. But if you're a fan of Star Trek and feel like there's a lot missing here with only 5 available, then, well, first of all, hey you, I love Star Trek too. And secondly, and more importantly, in the context of the game at least, there are 30 other races included in the game, but as minor non-playable factions. It's perhaps not the best way to have them in, but much better than them not being there at all. All main and minor factions have their own unique characteristics and advantages, and there's something that you should always consider. Birth of the Federation is built out of 2 layers. The strategic one, where you're doing most of the things in the game, from exploration through colonization to diplomacy and research. And the combat layer, in which you tackle any and all battles, small ship-to-ship skirmishes and clashes of entire huge-ass fleets. It's in full 3D, turn-based and pretty well put together, I must add. The main goal of the game is to create the biggest and most powerful empire in the galaxy, which sadly relegates the game to being winnable only by Conquest. Which, if you know anything about Star Trek, is something that Federation is not at all about. They're about exploration, meeting of new species and exchange of ideas and technologies, not bloodshed and destruction of ships or entire planets. Klingons are more into that fetish. But you know, it is what it is, and you can't look a gift Ferengi in his earlobes. It's worth pointing out that the joint victory with an ally is possible too, so you can sorta kinda craft an adventure of your own. You know, in your head, explaining this whole unfortunate winning goal as all major factions opposing you and you trying to build the biggest and strongest federation to protect the weak, so that the game would not feel entirely out of place. To summarize, you win if you completely defeat 2 rivals or control 60% of the population of Galaxy, well, 75% if you're with an ally. Each of the nations has 2 different rival nations to beat for it to count as win, and for Federation it's Romulans and Cardassians. Each of the planets that you control has to be micromanaged, and the resources of energy, food and industry units are used to determine how fast a particular planet can build structures or construct ships. Oh, and the maximum number of ships that you can have is dependent on the number of dilithium refineries that you own. So that's something you should always keep in mind when deciding which systems to include in your empire. For the fan of Star Trek or Forex strategies, Birth of the Federation is a must-play, and easily one of the most fun titles of 1999. For all others, however, well, honestly, I think you can skip it. Pharaoh is a historical city builder made with earlier Caesar Freeze engine, and for the most part, it's the same game, just set in a different location. It's like SimCity, but on a smaller scale, and focusing more on micro rather than macro management, and with as historical accuracy as it was possible. And it's all about planning in Pharaoh. I mean, it's about everything that will keep the city going, but planning is the king. So not only you need to make sure that the buildings have correct radius of influence so that your citizens would get access to everything that they would need, but you must also prepare for expansion and new needs for amenities and entertainment that may emerge in the future. So planning smart is the key, but planning smart and efficient is the key, keyhole, door and a whole goddamn palace. Did anyone actually ever use keys in a palace doors? I don't think so. While planning and building is important, getting from point A to point B as fast and uninterrupted as possible is what keeps the prosperous city running. So laying a network of roads and roadblocks in appropriate places to direct the movement of citizens is what will be more than necessary. While you need to make goods for the citizens to keep them happy and will be able to sell the remnants at the market for profit, it's not gonna be possible without having industries, so you'll need to plot those around the city too. They bring in goods for internal use and sale and also lower the unemployment rate, so they like the stone that kills 3 as opposed to 2 birds with 1 throw. So, you have your town, city running, it's basically self-sufficient, growing and happy, but is it really all? Did you make it? Is it game over and you never noticed? Nope. cause you will get raided, attacked, and it can be a small group or an entire army knocking at your proverbial gates. Being prepared and having ready army on call is what a good Pharaoh will make sure to have. Note that down. In essence, you can think of Pharaoh not like of any ancient city simulation, but like of a giant puzzle that keeps expanding in number of pieces, and each piece added to fulfill a particular city need or requirement opens it up for a few more to fit in, and you keep adding them and adding them and adding them, hoping to finally see the full picture, when in fact you'll be expanding on it near indefinitely. That's Pharaoh. Sorta, because it can be played in two different modes. Campaign, which takes you through a series of different locations during different periods of ancient Egypt, through progressively bigger and more demanding cities, starting with small nomad settlements, literally not villages even, then bigger trade centers to eventually huge and sprawling metropolises. As the campaign progresses, you earn promotions and get bumped up in the rank to eventually become the Pharaoh yourself. The second mode is so-called free build, and it's a set of standalone scenarios, some of which don't even have winning conditions, effectively becoming a sandbox mode. So you know, my most favorite mode in games like that. Pharaoh is fantastic, and 2-3 minutes is not enough to even cover its basics, so if anything I said sounded even remotely interesting to you, it's best that you give it a chance, as it may end up being your next favorite retro game. Rage of Mages 2, Necromancer, is a real-time strategy role-playing mixture and a direct sequel to the first game. Well, it's a standalone story, but it's direct, as in no other games in a long-running Allot series came in between. It's more of an RPG than RTS, but the combat definitely stinks of that fast-action top-down romp that everyone loved in Red Alert or Warcraft. Sadly, as follow-ups go, this one's all into that follow-up niche that's not trying to add meaningful features or be considerably better. It builds on part 1 with not much effort. Rage of Mages 2 serves a very linear storyline, which quite fortunately is rather fun, so while the game feels more like Rage of Mages 1.2a, maybe 1.2b, okay, 1.3 at most, it's not a chore to play and can be enjoyed if you don't mind the very RTS-like gameplay of it all. So we go from one quest to another, led by a string of tasks to complete, fighting what feels like armies of bodies composed of around 30 different units, throwing spells left and right and leaving scorched earth behind. Some quests are picked up at inns, others are revealed along with the story or are natural continuations of those that you've already completed. And while you can have a few of these available at the time and pick an order at which you'll attempt them, there's no real way to sidestep and stray from the path to completion, so to speak, and regardless how it sounds. While these are quite varied in what they're all about in terms of the story, most come down to a tactical combat encounter with one or more groups of enemies. So, you can't expect this one to match Baldur's Gate or Fallout. In fact, I'd say it's closer to Diablo in its design, though nowhere near the quality. So you'll tackle dragons, armies of orcs or crazy necromancers to name a few, all to seemingly save a village or town, avenge killed innocents or just rescue someone to name a few. These all are but reasons for your actions, nay, your motivation, and combat is always a solution. Still, despite the superficial quality of the plot of these quests, objectively speaking, gameplay itself is pretty fun, especially when your party expands or when you hire mercenaries. Other than the quests, some other RPG elements are naturally preserved within Rage of Mages 2, namely you can shop in towns, acquire and equip better weapons and gear, especially these found in loot from defeated enemies, and each of the characters have their own inventories, so while it's not really a full-fledged RPG, it feels a lot like it when not in combat and in the early game when you only have few characters. The more units you have though, the more the game will feel like a little below average in quality RTS, and its charm will bleak a bit too. I think it's pretty obvious by now that I was not a fan of Rage of Mages 2, and its grandiose, yet so straightforward you'll never stray from it quest to kill an evil and powerful necromancer. Its gameplay is too real strategy adjacent for me to appreciate, and the presentation rather lacking for 1999, though it has to be said that spell effects at night look quite pretty. Still, it's a decent budget little RPG RTS mix that's better suited for the fans of the latter or newcomers to the story-driven adventuring. 1999 is slowly coming to an end. I mean, not with this video, but I'm already looking up games for 2000 to get into. So if you have any particular requests for 1999 Windows games, now's the time to let me know. And if I only played or know them well enough to talk about them, I'll try to include them before the year is done with. Yes. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too, it helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.